Good evening and welcome to the July 18th, 2023 Town Council Workshop with Weaverville Town Council. At workshops, we're typically not making decisions. It's an opportunity for us to learn, to hear from folks, and to have discussions about about different subjects, and that's what we have tonight. We have a few different subjects to discuss. All of the items on tonight's agenda have been asked for either by residents or by council members to be placed on the agenda tonight. So we've got some interesting discussions, I think, coming up. The first item up is the Active Weaverville Committee. And I don't really want to have a committee, like I think the discussion we want to have here is last meeting we heard and approved the Active Weaverville plan. And so now I think it's how do we go about implementing the project staff plan? And I'd like to hear from how we go about. One option would be we assign a committee to prioritize those projects. I think there's like 70 of the projects or something in the plan. But first, Lynn, do you have any ideas, or what work do you have in this regard already?
I don't have in particular thoughts about who we might appoint to it, other than those that were obviously some or all of those that were involved in the committee that the steering committee that worked with traffic planning and design folks. They would obviously be folks that are invested in the project and would be great to be involved. The one thing that I just want to say again, and I've said this a number of times, is we cannot assume, and I think I've got to say this to the committee when they meet as well, that we cannot assume that this is going to be easily paid for or staffed, because as we all know, we are a very small staff, and very small meaning James would be our only planning person. So if we start getting into some of the larger projects or the projects within the plan that require more resources, then we're going to have to look at how do we calendar those, how do we fit those into future budgets and that sort of thing. And I think we all realize that the Active Weaverville plan is not a plan that is scheduled to be complete in 5 years. No. I mean, that many of the elements of the plan are probably much longer than any of us around these tables will be around. So those are just the only comments that I would have at this time.
So certainly the committee, one thing, if we went to the committee route, what we'd want them to do is to prioritize those projects, price those projects, and then come back with recommendations. I'm sorry.
I have a question on that. Did I understand when we heard about it last month that NCDOT is paying for part of those?
I can help a little bit.
Yes, please.
Help away. Yeah.
So those things are possible, but will they pay for all of them? No, probably not in our lifetime. But at the last meeting last week, there was a spot meeting, and that is potential transportation projects that get submitted. So during these reviews.
So if I could just remind you, Catherine sits on the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
The MPO, which works with the NCDOT. So as that committee, we get to recommend 14 highway projects and 14/greenway pedestrian type projects. There will probably be 4 meetings before the final list ever goes to true submittal. And then this is like stuff that's like a wish list for a 10-year plan from 23 to 33. And so on that wish list is from Lake Louise to Brown Street, a sidewalk, which is, according to them, the #1 priority on the Active Weaverville plan. So I was real excited to see it on there. So if it were to score high enough, so that's where the NCDOT people get involved. And they rank everything on their computers, and it comes up with a score. And if it scores high enough for it to be granted, then yes, they would pay for it.
Pay for part of it or pay for all of it or some of
Yes,
it?
yes.
So 14 projects, that's 14 county projects,
Yeah, well, yes.
not 14 Weaverville projects.
Right, not 14. But I was real happy because while we're talking about that, they also put on there last meeting, about 6 months ago, it was approved for a study to be paid for to determine how to connect the Weaverville Greenway with the Woodfin Greenway. Okay, that's just a study. And so people say, well, we don't have a Weaverville Greenway yet. So another one that is on the wish list is the Greenway again, Rims Creek Greenway from Corey Road to Carpin Field. Now, the thing about that one is if we were to score high enough in the next, 10 years for that to come about, we would have to pay 20% of whatever the cost was. So if it's $4 million, we have to pay 20%. If we can't pay that 20%, then it gets marked off the list and it don't come back around anytime soon. So that's another reason I wanted to bring that up.
Hey, Catherine, remind me again in that top 10 of the projects that they had, where the segment that went across 26, connecting Weaver Boulevard over to Walmart shopping, because I know that was one of the high priorities one too.
It was, but it was probably the most expensive one. So I don't think that the active Weaverville actually kept it. If it's in the top 10, it's low. I mean, it's
Okay.
wanted, but the way they ranked them was by things that we thought that we could afford.
Right. And that one, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if and when we get back to widening 26 up by here and that bridge gets altered, that's a no-brainer that's a good time to do it.
Yes, and when that comes about, for example, it's gonna probably take 4 years to do the one that's out here that's being widened now.
Right, with the bridges.
Yes, and so then we'll figure out which bridge is gonna be next. I know that on the projects that we're studying about now, there's the possibility of coming from UNCA to here, or from here to Madison County. So that's 2 other complete segments. So pretend that they happen next. So 4 years for this one, and then 4 years for another one, and then 4 years for the next one, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
And then the other good thing that's not about a greenway, but just so while I'm on this, and I don't have to talk about it again, the number one thing on the wish list for out here for roads was to put a shoulder on Rims Creek. So I was really excited about that. And I think that might score high enough to actually happen.
Yay, DOT.
And I brought a blank one of these if you want it, Selena,
That'd be great.
that I've not marked all over.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So what do you all think is forming a committee to do this work? Is that the best approach here?
I think so. Keep us prioritized on task and report back to us. It could be very helpful.
And should we ask first the people who served on the study committee, if you will, to continue to be active in that, to be active in the active Weaverville plan? Does that make sense?
Volunteers.
Or what if we had some from that committee and some that are
And
just
some new.
citizens that are interested and some, have a committee person from 2 or 3 or 4 different parts, places.
I think
That's kind of how the steering committee was. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's people all over the community, but then you've got people's energy and passion to stay engaged, because you'll have some people drop off, of course.
You will have some people who are going to say, no, I did my time.
You said you'd be willing to stay on, right, Jeff?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of driving it in the beginning, but it morphed into something a lot bigger, which is great.
And Rachel said last month that she would be willing to be on it, so there's we got 2 members already.
I guess the advantage to that is those who are already on the committee have all that background.
Right.
And they can, yeah. Makes
And to
sense.
Catherine's point, with this kind of funding sources, none of this stuff works quickly. You're thinking in 5-10-year cycles, which kind of jives with the way we've been trying to look strategically. What do we want to look like 20 years out?
Any other items of discussion? Good deal. So we got 2 members. Selena, would you mind contacting them and see if they would be willing, who would be willing to continue to work on this?
Certainly,
Thank you.
certainly. Do you, one more question on that, in that regard, do you want to appoint a chair, or do you want them to appoint their own chair?
You guys have any feelings about that? Let them figure it out. Next item is future of fireworks for town events. We had a big crowd this year, as you know, for the 4th of July. That was great. But every year, I think we get a lot of concerns and complaints about fireworks. And I know a few of you have discussed with me since the 4th of July that maybe we should again look at some alternatives to fireworks displays on the 4th of July. And luckily, I know Selena has already has come prepared, has done some research. So what do you know, Selena?
Thank you. I apologize, I was not able to include this in the agenda packet that I sent out to you, but I literally was still meeting with folks and trying to get more information for you as I drafted a memo to you. So I'm just going to briefly hit the highlights on this, and if you want to take a minute to read it all, that's fine. But just to give you a history of our expenditures for the last several years, you'll see that in that first table there under fireworks. So we've gone from 17,000 in 2018 to our estimated cost for traditional fireworks.
I don't think we do have that. But
We don't have it. We just have the,
Yeah, I laid it
Oh.
on here.
The one with the green on it?
yeah,
Yes, the one with the green.
mine just has
Was
the,
it on that side of it?
Mine doesn't matter.
Oh, we're missing pages.
Anyway, go over it. We'll get it later.
Wait,
We're quick
mine just
studies.
the.
here's another.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what
Ever got
happened.
one?
We'll share.
Thank you.
You guys got them?
Doug doesn't have
Doug,
one.
okay, Doug, there you go.
I apologize, I'm
No problem.
not sure what happened there. So in that first table, 2018, we started with, or we didn't start, but in that year, we spent 17,125 on fireworks. And then, as you'll see, in 2020, that was COVID year, so we did not have fireworks that year, so that is blank. Then going into our estimate for next year, and again, this is for traditional fireworks, we're looking at 29,000 using the same company that we have now. I haven't looked around at other companies at this point in time, other than to get some estimates from folks that are other managers from across the state that are on my listserv, and they've provided some information. Also, just to show you, just to give you a comprehensive overview of the expenses that the town incurs for the July 4th event. I think a lot of folks don't realize how much work goes into this, but there's a huge amount of work. Pre-planning, and this really doesn't include all of the pre-planning work that staff spends time on, but it does include placement of the fire blankets on the school over there. It includes the fireworks, the stage lights and sound, the band, the tent rentals, the porta potties, generators, those kind of things, and then it includes some estimates of personnel. So we're looking at roughly this year, around $70,000 for this event, just for the day of, or and the night before, putting out cones and that kind of thing. So it is quite an expense for our town. And then also on page 2, just to remind you of some research that I've done in the past. So you'll see some in italics there in a manager's report that I submitted to you in January 2022. We have continued ever since I've been with the town. We've continued to look at, kind of do a debrief at town council meetings to look at fireworks and the impact, and to kind of evaluate the number of complaints that we've received and what types of complaints and that sort of thing. So the italics there is just from that town manager's report, where I reported to you that we were going to go with what they call a pancake mortar that is not quite, or excuse me, we were going to do away with the pancake mortars and go more with eliminating some of the larger salutes. Those are the ones that literally shake the ground and rattle windows and that kind of thing. So we did back off of those some. although our fireworks are still very loud, and we still do get complaints about them. I did at that point in time look at laser shows, and we received some quotes at that point in time. Again, it was over a year ago, looking at from 25,000 to 40,000 for a 15 to 20 minute show. There's some drawbacks to laser light shows because you really either need fog or something in the air to project the light, or you need buildings or a screen of trees or something like that in order for you really to get the best view of a laser light show. I'm going to talk about that a little further because I have received some more information on laser light shows as well. Last Friday, I met with Pyrotechnico, which is the company that provides our traditional fireworks. They are working with some partners in providing drone light shows. I know that's all the rage these days. It's all the rage for a significant amount of money, I'll tell you. Drone light shows, just to hit a couple of those bullet points there, drone light shows utilize groups of drones. So it's not just one or two drones. It's a group of 200 to 400 to 600. You have to have at least 200 drones to provide any decent light show. So you can do customized light shows. You can do all kinds of things with those. But as you might expect, customization adds more money, adds more cost to everything. The type of drone show that we would want to require would require a safety area of 700 feet. That takes away the ball field. We can't because of FAA and because of other regulations, they would not do a drone show from the ball field, which is our biggest space in town currently, and that's why we've been using traditional fireworks. So unless anyone else has a huge piece of land that they would offer to allow us to use to put on a drone show in town, we are out of space for that amount of space anyway, for a drone show.
I'll be honest, Shepherd would want to have those.
I was
drones at
just
his
thinking
party.
that.
He's got a big,
Um,
and he also has $70,000.
Yes, we'll name it after him.
Drone shows obviously can't operate in rain or moderate wind because they've got to stay in the air. Every 200 drones cost an estimated $70,000, and that's for an 8 to 10 minute show.
So you'd have 200 in the air, and they're all
all
just
the time.
coordinated.
They are all synchronized. It's I've watched a bunch of videos since our meetings, and it's amazing. It truly is amazing. The place closest to us that has put one on recently is Raleigh, with a lot of Raleigh money and a lot of Downtown Business Association money. So it's not a small venture by any stretch. The other drawback to drone shows right now is there's just not a lot of companies that offer it. So therefore, as we go along and as drones become more popular, I'm sure other companies will come out with the opportunity to use them as vendors. But right now, it's just not. The technology is just not as advanced enough so that companies are buying into this.
So I imagine it's competition for those limited companies. You probably have to reserve well in advance.
Right, yeah, yeah. So while speaking with the folks from Pyrotechnico, I again spoke to them about laser light shows. They again said, that obviously it's an option if we have a space where, a very small space where people can watch the lights reflect off of buildings or off of a tree line or off of a screen if we put one up, or if they use fog machines, because and I won't even try to get into all the scientific pieces of that, but evidently fog machines and condensation allows the light to show better and provides a better show.
Would the main strip of North Main have buildings like that frontage? Is that enough to have the effect? Like if you did this and you pushed it up North Main a little bit, like in the main area of the business section, is that the kind of backdrop they're looking for? I mean, I've seen these
Very
in other
small.
cities where it's huge, you know,
Yeah.
huge old buildings.
Right.
They don't have that.
Very small, and we would have to cordon it off. People couldn't be in the area.
Yeah.
So I don't know how visually appealing
Oh, yeah.
that would be. I mean, I can certainly do more research on it, to find out. The other problem with that, with using our downtown space and our buildings is we cannot turn off lights, so street lights. And we can turn off our lights that we rent, for 4th of July, for instance. We can turn those lights off, but Duke Power lights, we cannot turn off. We can't turn off street lights. So any ambient light that you have like that is gonna
lessen the
is
show.
gonna lessen your show. Yeah. And then finally, just to give you another option, if you ask me my opinion about it, I'm not gonna be really optimistic about this one, but it's called a close proximity show. They could continue, we could have a close proximity show done that would lessen the amount of sound noise pollution. You hear a lot of folks say, why doesn't everybody do silent fireworks? Well, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a silent firework. You have much less noise from some, but you can't do a silent fireworks show. And so what Pyrotechnico says is they can do a show that's 80% less noise, and that's for a 60 to 75 minute, 60 to 75,000 for 15 minutes. They did send me some videos to watch of that. If I was living on Brown Street, I would still wouldn't like it. If I was living on Park, I would still not, it would still be loud. They are not quiet. It does remove some of those larger booms and some of the pop, pop, pop when it gets, way, the ones that go way up in the air. And it does reduce some of that back, but the difference in the show, and I'll tell you, if you didn't see our show this year, it was fantastic. It was a great show, but these kind of shows are not going to be that aesthetically pleasing at all. And I watched, I think, 4 videos that have been sent to me on close proximity shows, and they're not up to snuff, as they say, with regard to, in comparison. So there's going to be some trade-offs if we want a smaller show, less, shorter show, and remember, we have gone close to 25 minutes in years past. I think this year we were like 22 minutes. And so we put on a significant show, but we pay for it. But we're getting to the point where unless we want to keep lessening our show at the baseball field, that's where we are.
So
I hope that's helpful.
maybe the time is coming for the town when we're looking at expenses and the restrictions which are continually being imposed on us as far as distances and everything. Maybe we ought to think about not necessarily having the fireworks, having some other substitute thing. We have the band, we have other things, but, we're getting up there. It's quite a bit of money now for a little town like ours. And we do get a lot of complaints with the sound.
One of the things that I've kind of tossed around to a couple of you that have spoken to me about our July 4th event is, it may be that time where we stop doing fireworks and we put on a festival. And we start it earlier in the day and end it by dusk, and that way folks can go home. They can, even though they're legal, They can go home and fire their own fireworks and watch their own show. But we have we have something where we invite food vendors and we invite, we have a larger kids area, and, we really just ramp up our festivities and still have music, maybe have, instead of one band, maybe we have 2 or 3 bands, and maybe we have local folks playing. And, so that's kind of what I've been thinking. Because I did ride around, and I know you all received an email from a family-owned park about having installed solar panels there, and I did talk to them. I went, and I'm all around that day, and so I went and talked to them a couple of times, and they were truly concerned, and I can see why, because the mortar, just the amount of debris that comes from these fireworks is huge. And if you want someone to speak to that directly, Dale certainly can. But as I rode around, I rode around on the golf cart as far as down on Merriman, and there was debris down there. So and I talked to a couple of other residents that live here on Main, and they said they have debris in their yard every year. So and kudos to our Public Works Department. They do a fantastic job cleaning up. But there's still, they obviously can't go on private property and clean up someone's yard and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of debris that comes from these mortars that we've been firing.
So then, have you had a chance to talk with any of the other towns that do not have fireworks and see what kind of programs they have for the 4th?
The vast majority do not do fireworks. The ones that do fireworks are those that have huge parks. Let's use a very close example is Fletcher. Fletcher does fireworks fairly regularly. They do fireworks as part of their summer concert series too. But if you've never been to their park, they own.
It's a huge park.
It's huge. It's huge, and and there are no homes that abut right up to the park. So, there are a few like that have large park areas where they can safely and reasonably fire fireworks. But the vast majority are not doing fireworks anymore for the reasons that we're discussing tonight.
Well, we don't have that much space, that's a problem.
Right.
Well, Mars Hill does fireworks. They've got the big Mars Hill campus, the athletic center that lets them use that, or they work with them on that. I think the ideal of a festival, maybe, kids parade, or, a walking parade, or, things that the high school can, and I know there's no school at the 4th of July, but, there's people who like to participate in things, dancers and batons.
I like the idea of a festival or more music. We can have music on Main as well as music or a square dance at the community center, using some local bands. I know a bunch of people that would come and play a square dance. I'm probably a little biased because I'm on at 20 Brown, and I can see the fireworks lighted, launched, and explode, and hear it shake and rattle the house. And we have to take the pets out of town. So even though it's kind of neat, I kind of feel like maybe this is time for us to try something new.
I have had a chance to talk with someone that lives in Biltmore Forest, and they had the program like you're talking about, Selena, starting earlier, including things for the kids and other kind of things and making a change. And so I said, well, y'all might want to consider that.
It
Kind of
might
an all-day street party.
It might be worth asking the Downtown Business Association their thoughts on alternatives.
Asking the who? Asking
The Business Association.
From a cost perspective, if let's say we got rid of fireworks or backfilled it with some other idea, like we're talking about from a total budget perspective. So we're talking about dropping the 27.5 expense, and maybe backfilling some of that with something new. So the total budget would be about the same or minus about 25,000, right? From a financial perspective.
Well, a lot of the cleanup is because of that too now.
What's that?
A lot of the cleanup and other kind of things with the public Works Department. It would come, it was less than that, so.
Yeah,
It's a cascading thing.
yeah, I think you're looking at significantly more than that, with a festival because of personnel, personnel costs. You're not, we wouldn't block off near as much, street frontage, because we block off.
More of a savings, you mean?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
More of a savings,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
So it would be,
savings,
it would be,
yes.
it would still be a cost, but
Right.
Right, it'd be
presumably
less.
it would be a good chunk
Yes,
less than it
I think it would
currently
be
is.
quite a bit less,
Okay.
more than just the fireworks amount. Obviously, we might have to pay some stipends to some, some bands and that kind of thing.
Right.
But in personnel costs alone, I think you're looking at quite a savings.
And
So-
people can park a lot closer too. If there's no fireworks, they can use the schools up here.
That's right.
How many actual complaints are we getting each year, the type that don't do this anymore? Like, how many, is it a dozen, is it 20, is it 5?
I think I received maybe 5. I don't know what other,
From a law enforcement aspect, a few years ago, those calls, as you can might imagine, were overwhelming dispatch. So
Okay.
the dispatch said, can we have an agreement with all the entities that we will not respond to those complaint calls? So with Weaverville, Oakland County, simply no response to a noise calls unless it's
Okay.
property. So very accurate.
Okay, so it's a larger number, that's, yeah, and the reason I bring that up, I mean, let's be honest, it's probably a large number of people that, for nostalgic reasons, myself included, like it, and would like it to continue, but it's just because now we're looking at the bigger picture too. In the past, I kind of tongue-in-cheek brought up an idea of like, well, can they get noise canceling headphones for that half hour a year? We'll provide them. That may or may not be practical. I was serious when I brought it up because, it's once a year. But if what you're saying is true, Ron, that we've got like a huge groundswell, and if we did a poll, we'd find out a lot of people are saying, hey, do something different. Well, that's a different matter. Maybe we should look at a different approach.
One of the things Doug and I talked about the day of the fireworks is that it's truly a community draw. And so with Weaverville only having, say, 5,000 residents, but there was easily 2,000 or 3,000 people here for the fireworks.
Right.
And I would say at least half of them are not in the town limits. They come from outside the town limits in the community because they know we have this great fireworks show. And will they continue to come if it's just a festival? They might, because their children go to school with our children, and this is their small town community. Is there some other places they can go? Yes, they can go to Asheville, they can go to Mars Hill and see a fireworks show. It's just that we have really, as I was saying to Selena, a word that I saw up north was thickly settled. We have become thickly settled here in Weaverville, and it's hard to have a fireworks without dropping on somebody's roof.
Right.
And anytime you're that somebody, you're gonna complain.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that won't complain but don't like it.
We didn't get a lot of emails, but quite a few neighbors are saying, I wish we could do something differently because of the noise and the animals.
Yeah, and I didn't dare get on Facebook.
Yeah, no, I
Because
didn't.
I'm sure that we always have complaints every year, that are on social
Or
media.
people just walk by and mention it, say, I wish we could do something differently that wasn't so noisy, so polluting, so frightening to the animals.
But there's just as many people that say how wonderful it was
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
beautiful
Right.
it was. And,
Yeah.
and, they commend the town of Weaverville and all the staff for such a great job.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, Catherine. We, for whatever reason, we've got this great event going. I mean, that thing was rocking and, everybody stayed for the fireworks. So how much of that is due to the fireworks? If we got rid of them, would half that event go away? We don't know, right? Hate to mess with something that's been growing and is a draw for people.
They could still come for the straight party and then go up to Mars Hill when it gets dark. Where I lived in Dallas, it was a big city and a lot of communities, and they had a fireworks show way out in a big field like Selena was describing. And all the park and ride parking lots had shuttle buses and stuff. So, maybe we
Yeah.
don't want to do
And-
shuttle buses,
You
but we
really
could
run at the
still,
cost.
pardon me?
You really run at the cost.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean, we did that several years ago when
But
we had,
Mars Hill isn't that far.
yeah, when we had the fireworks at the lake, we rented buses, young transportation buses, and it does raise your cost about $6,000. But, and we could still do that for a festival. We could work out some kind of, something. I feel certain with the creativity that we have on staff that we can come up with a festival that pleases the community. Folks, you get paid the big bucks to make the decisions that are best for the whole of the town. And so, at this point in time, it may be best that we consider looking at a different option rather than fireworks.
So it sounds like there certainly is a movement away from having fireworks show. We don't normally make decisions at workshops. Do we want to make that decision, or do we want to put that on next week's agenda and give the public opportunity to comment on it?
Yeah, let's put it on the agenda.
There we go. But it sounds like from council that the shift is away from having fireworks. Very good, thank you. And this may, and so we've discussed food trucks before, and I know I got lots of comments during the 4th of July event because not all the restaurants are open. There was real long lines of the ones that were open. They said, why can't we have food trucks? And to be honest, I know we discussed food trucks before, and I don't recall what the rules we came up with even are, but they're included here. So James or Selena, could you give us a quickie reorientation to what our rules are, and do we need to consider changing them, particularly if we're going to have some kind of festival? Maybe having food trucks might be a piece of that.
I'm happy to give you a real quick answer, but James can come up, or Jennifer, either one can give you the furthermores of it. We are permitted right now to have food trucks. I sign off on special event permits regularly when there's food trucks involved.
Oh, okay, good.
So, the code, and you've got section 20, which specifically deals with mobile food vendors, i.e. food trucks. But then you've also got, on page, where is it? Page 4 begins your special event section, and it also addresses food trucks. So anytime, and I've got some highlights there just things that I wanted to highlight for you. Anytime there's a special event application submitted, let's take Music on Main, for instance, they submit a special event permit. They have to give an illustration of where those vendors are, and then those food vendors have to go through Buncombe County Health Department to deal with all that. So there's really very little the town has to do, with the exception of cleanup after food vendors are here. But the town has permitted food vendors, or mobile food vendors.
So it sounds like this is kind of a moot point, maybe, that it wasn't so much that we're not allowing the food trucks as we didn't have enough food trucks, for instance, being here.
Yeah, is there anything you want to add, James?
As far as regular business perspective, we only have 2 sites that are permitted for mobile food vendors. But as Ms. Conkling suggested, for special events, we have the ability to permit those
Okay.
more specifically on public property.
Good deal. Anything else on this matter?
I'm wondering, do we need to maybe make a public announcement or make it a little bit more obvious for potential food vendors that we have?
That they could attend, they might not be aware. You mean?
Yeah, there might be 2 spots, but in special occasions, they can apply for. I don't know.
2 spots.
What are our 2 spots?
You want to explain that a little bit, because I think there's maybe.
I think we were saying is during special
Sure.
events.
So,
they could permit-
so let's concentrate on chapter 20, which allows for a mobile food vendor site to be established anywhere within C1, C2, or I. We only have 2 of those in town, those being Leveler and Wagner. It's been widely available for the better part of 5 to 6 years now. We had 5 or 6 sites to begin with, and that's dwindled over time down to just 2. I would like to think that the property owners in those zoning districts are aware of their options. It's just not being used all that much now, for whatever reason.
Well, it could be the demand is not there to draw food trucks. I would think that would be one of the things.
You've got to make enough money or you can't come be here.
Yeah.
To the degree that it informs the conversation from the private side, we did have one site being alluvium transition away from the food truck site and build their kitchen. That was the decision that they thought was best for them, and that was 3-4 years ago.
So,
But during special events, we actually could get permits for food trucks to be in other locations.
absolutely. So
So
for,
that's the thing. It's just that those are 2 permanent sites. Sure.
yeah, so given if we're talking about Independence Day activities, we could, not saying we would do this necessarily, but we could line the street with food vendors. And that's covered under our code. So we're allowed to do those things.
And that might be a draw for a 4th of July festival, actually, having a food truck court or something. Okay, any other questions on this item? If not, the next item is social districts, and just as a memory shaker, state permitted social districts a couple of years ago now, I think it's been, and we had a discussion at that time, but decided not to do that. Since then, I think they've become more commonplace, and I know that we've been approached by the Business Association, some others, with the idea of revisiting this issue. So, Jennifer, you want to give us any relevant or important information regarding social districts?
Sure, I'm happy to. A couple different, again, the laws on this have evolved since they were originally enacted a few years ago. There are several places, I think, that have set up sort of standing social districts where you've got a district that is kind of in place fairly routinely. But then I think most jurisdictions that are using them are doing it on an event basis. And that is perfectly fine for you to couple a special event permit that the town manager may issue with a town council ordinance that allows a social district within that, within the confines of that special event. For instance, the 4th of July or an Oktoberfest, if somebody wanted to create a social district, again, there are pretty specific rules in the law that you have to follow. But it would provide you an opportunity to allow your ABC permittees, your breweries, your restaurants that have an ABC permit to, using special cups, allow their patrons to walk out of their building onto the sidewalk or a street if it's closed for this purpose and designated as a social district to consume that beverage in that area. And actually, the law now says that you can go from place to place. It used to be you could just go into the open area, but not take your leveler beer cup that's marked as a social district cup. You can now take that and walk into another business if they are allowing that to happen. You could take your leveler and go drink your beer at Alluvium if you wanted to, if Alluvium is allowing that. Again, lots of rules that have to be put in place, but those are typically done with the adoption of the ordinance. So that ordinance sets out the rules for that special or for that social district, especially as it ties to a special event.
Jennifer, as I recall, the last time we discussed this a couple of years ago, I think our chief pointed out the enforcement of the rules was very complicated. Who's going to do it? Now, I see in this, it's being proposed that they pay for someone to do that checking. So you want to elaborate on that?
So that is another change to that law as it originally was adopted, is you can now provide, say, for instance, the WBA puts on their music on Main and wants to designate a certain area as a social district. They could provide the private security for that event. It does not have to be our law enforcement officers that do that. That said, They do have the right and probably will provide some oversight on that event. You've got your alcohol, law enforcement folks that will be certainly detailed for that type of event, just to make sure that everybody is complying with what they should be. But the full burden of providing that maintenance, management and maintenance of the social district does not necessarily have to fall to all of our police department.
Another question there, Chief, I think there was some discussion about possibly having someone outside doing, what are your thoughts on having an outside enforcement group beside your own troops?
I think it could be utilized, but I don't know from a cost-saving standpoint of how that would translate. Quite frankly, I think that it would be fairly expensive to do that. What that would entail, I don't know, to be quite honest with you. A private entity or private group. I reached out to a number of different municipalities to try and understand how they are grappling with this. There's 32 municipalities in North Carolina that have been vetted and approved by the AAC Commission. There's only one in Western North Carolina, and that's Silva, that's doing that. Their approach is quite different than what you might imagine. But everybody else seems to be falling into they're trying to define their districts. For example, they're actually making the district smaller. They're still trying to vet it and get it smaller because they realize it's just too much for them. So the only entity that I know of is Silva that's doing it. They don't have any type of security or extra measures or extra control.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just curious, I'm not sure if I understood your question right, but besides the logistical things of having private security, is that something you would welcome or that you would not welcome?
I think it would be problematic. You know,
That's what I was getting at.
people wouldn't understand their role.
Right.
Quite honestly, it's police or polyester or not. I don't know how that would translate. Quite honestly, and also there comes an issue. I feel that signage, for an example, I reached out to Chief Hatton with Silva. They're talking about universal signage being on each business that's within that district and making it look the same as other signs that are posted prior to going into that district. I think they've worked out their bugs, but their topography is much different, as you can imagine if you've been to Silva than what ours is. Their spaces are different. Their needs are different. There's a lot of, I want to say, urban clutter, I guess. There's a lot of signage up here. I don't know how that would translate into what people would look at it, as opposed to the area that there's fairly open stuff here. Churches, for example, there's areas that people can ingress and egress in this area, and they'll say they can see a sign, but they have to post it out.
Just to make sure I understand, so the universal signage is identifying the limits of the district.
That's correct. That's correct.
And the participants.
Huh?
And the participants.
And the businesses within that, whether they want alcohol there, whether they don't want alcohol.
Gotcha.
They decided they have to have a universal sign. Business, we pay for those signs. There's a lot of logistics.
And the firm would have to be familiar with the ordinance and all the details, which I would question if they would know all the details of that. So
I did provide you, hopefully I provided you, I think I provided you an email from the WBA. Hopefully that's there in front of you.
That is there.
Yeah.
So just.
In fact, Sarah Myers is here, so I hate to put you on the spot, but can you speak to this from the Business Associate's perspective? What ideas have you guys discussed, or what plans or ideas you all have?
And I would think you would need to think about expenses to your businesses. You know, when you're looking at, I think it helps a little bit that the laws have changed, that you don't have to have a different cup, if you will, to go to alluvium versus to leveler, but still, those are expensive. They have to be, you know, they have to be, unless you correct me, they have to be labeled and they have to.
Yes.
You know, So, and one of the things that I would recommend, that if we go, you know, if town council says you want to go ahead and start dabbling in social districts and having some events, one of the things that I would want to recommend is that you allow me to bring back to you a cost estimate. And so one of the things that I would expect that we would do is, right now, I think the application fee is like $300 or something. With a social district, it would be my recommendation to you that unless it's a town event, that if it's a for-profit event from another group, I'm going to recommend to you that they pay for some of the resources. I think that's only fair, because that, you know, we're considering taxpayers here. These are taxpayer dollars, and when they're asked to, and I'm talking mainly about police and public works, when they're asked to take care of a private event and what could be considered a large event, even though Florida Avenue and Merchants Alley are small, it would be large from the standpoint of manpower, because you have to have someone controlling those entrances, those egress and ingress. You've got to have that. And that could mean even people coming through, let's say, coming through one business and going back out the back door of another. So think about that on those that are on Merchants Alley. You know, you could have folks that are trying to work their way through and go out the back door of a business, but you've got to have people watching for that kind of thing. We've got to have.
And signage.
And
The law
signage.
does require signage on those back
Well,
doors.
and this said that if you if you go in one door and out the other, and when you walk out the other, it's not the social district. There
That's-
has to be a sign there on the business back door or front
That's
door
correct.
that says you can't go past this point. I loved Music on Main, and I thought it was fun, but it did get a little out of control. And I think one of the things that I saw happen was people who are human beings bring in their own alcohol that they did not purchase there. And I know that's against the law, and yet I know that it happened.
And I wonder if we can ask this right now, also now we can ask it or thought about the social district, their roles, but around the creation around alcohol. Just for sure.
I don't.
Private security is really all it says.
But at the end of the day, we're not enacting social districts tonight. So let's, okay. Just wanted to make sure that we're clear. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, in my view, and in protecting the town, any private security would have to report to our police department, period. No questions about that. I don't think that there would be a reason to deputize them, and actually, there's no way we can deputize them. But we cannot, in other words, we cannot make them a part of our true police force. They could work as security, but at the end of the day, if there's an issue where you've got to arrest somebody, they don't have power of arrest.
One thing, just so I'm clear on what the outcome we're all looking for, you guys are looking for if we do this, I'm hearing to make it more easy for the people that attend to move around the town and not be inconvenienced, or are we trying to drive more revenue for the businesses? Do we have like any clear, like what's the main outcome?
Business Association did. I would like to suggest that you take and look at the regulations that the state has, also what the town has. And there's certain things that are optional that the town does. And come back and say that how y'all would like to see it crafted within the rules and regulations. And then Selena could take that into account. And, because we're really going by what your objectives are and so forth. And so I'd like to request that you do that, bring it back, and we expand on it. I would suggest that.
That would be helpful.
I did like, Sarah, I did like your idea of the bartending service. I think that's a great idea. That gets your volunteers who were at times violating laws. We did have some instances where folks that were volunteering at the beer areas, who were drinking, which is illegal. And so I love the idea that you got as far as the having a professional bartending service. I think that's the way to go if we go about this any other way. I think it's.
So it sounds like there's that there's kind of agreement that having special events, social events might be a good idea. What we need to craft what that might look like, if I get nods there. So, Sarah, we would welcome you working with Selena and having come up with your ideas how you all would want to see this happen, and then working with Jennifer to see what you guys want and what's legal and how we can construct something that would be beneficial for the town. Very good. Thanks. Unfortunately, the next item is not as happy. Recreation complex bids are, of course, bigger than we expected. How much bigger are they, Selena?
I believe this one is on Jennifer.
Jennifer, how much
I
bigger
can
are
tell
they?
you, but I'd rather
See, she
her
wants,
share
see,
the
she
bad
wants,
news.
she says to get us bad news. Jennifer, you get this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a reminder, at your last meeting, you directed the town manager to go ahead and award the bid to any responsive low bidder on the rec complex, assuming that it was in budget. They came back, we've received 3 bids. One was deemed non-responsive because it didn't have all the elements in it. The other 2, both of which were over budget. One was $427,000. The low bid, which was submitted by JLS, was $391,000, roughly $391,200. Again, over the budget that had been established for this. But in talking about it, we kind of reminded ourselves that the budget that was established was really just sort of starter money. It was seed money to stick in there as a placeholder before we actually got into this. And so I don't know that we had any basis for the amount that we started it with. So what you're going to see tonight, and you've got a draft amended and restated capital project ordinance where we are recommending that town manager and public works director are recommending that you award to JLS for this project at that based on their bid. But what we would like to see to complete the project is a budget of $450,000. Now, some monies have already been allocated to this project, but some additional funding is needed in the amount of $172,262.45 just to get to that $450,000. That's going to cover all of the landscape architect fees that you've already approved the contract for. The JLS believes that in working with staff, they've identified some areas where they might be able to save us a little bit of money. And so what we're proposing is $380,000 for the JLS contract. And it's possible that we can save more on that, but at this point, we feel that that's a pretty conservative, pretty comfortable number that they can get to. Budget for town staff to construct to retrofit the building that's up there for the bathrooms and storage, and to take on the landscaping. We recommend, think that 45,000 is sufficient for that. Miscellaneous fixtures and equipment, things like locks on the fences, things like that we just don't know what we're gonna need until we get into that project. Recommending a $5,000 budget for that, $1,000 for permit fees, and $5,000 just for contingency in case we need to float money into one of those other areas. In speaking with the town manager and finance director Dozier, I think everybody feels very comfortable that there is enough money that will, coming out of last year's budget, that will revert to general fund to fully cover this $172,000 figure. It's less savings that will go into general fund, but it's not like you're taking money out of what you already have. It would be coming out of savings, whether it's interest income, additional interest income that has been realized, or savings within expenditures for this last year's budget. Or revenues, increases in revenues. Happy to answer questions. I know this was not great news on the amounts, but we are really comfortable, I think, with the low bidder. This is a company that Mr. Pennell's folks have worked routinely with on paving projects, so there's a comfort level in the quality, in their work, and the comprehensive nature of the bid that was submitted. So I think he is pleased to work with them again on this project. And if it's the will of council to move this project forward, would ask that you consider adopting the amended and restated capital project ordinance, award the bid for the rec complex to JLS, and authorize the town manager to continue to negotiate with them and execute a contract that staff feels is acceptable and within the budget that's established within this capital project ordinance.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah. Are there any questions for Jennifer before we move forward? I mean, to her about you.
No, that's okay, sorry.
Just
questions or discussion?
one comment. I think you were light in your assessment that we called it a budget, but let's face it, it was a placeholder. What is it? Let's throw it in there. So we never really did a good budget, so it could have been a lot higher than that. The other, just an aside, we had a really positive, I think, first meeting yesterday on the committee that we talked about to come up with process for the whole rec area. A lot of pent up excitement, and cautiously hoping that it would be in place this fall. And there's lots of other, kind of like the festival that we have on the 4th of July. There's a lot of things that can come out of this complete center. Right now, we've got half of it. So I'm positive on it, and hope everybody else is too.
Any other questions or comments?
I wish
Councilwoman?
that we had, all this excitement led to some fundraisers. I mean, we're continuing to take money out of the fund balance over and over this year. We
Yes,
voted to take bukus of money out of the
Yes.
fund balance. So one of my questions, I know there's a lot of pent up excitement. Is this something we really need now? If we waited 9 months, is there a possibility that we could get that grant? Because we've talked about the fact that there's a lot of money out there for things like playgrounds and complexes like this. It's just a matter of you have to wait and see. It's that, you can't have them when you want them. You have to have them when they're available. So.
And it would be a crapshoot, really. We could wait, and then we get a grant or something.
Higher cost,
Pardon?
higher cost.
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, it's kind of like the water treatment decision only on a micro level, So that would be rolling the dice.
I mean, the one good thing I hear is that it's somebody that we feel good on their quality and usually meets their lead times. That's the good thing from a purchasing person.
And, you know, on the donation thing, we could call these Cordell Courts.
Yeah. There you go.
That's not gonna help me any.
Think about it. Big thing.
You know, I was gonna throw something in there about donations. We're still selling bricks slowly, but we're still selling bricks down at the
Have you all
community
bought your
center.
bricks yet?
We did.
And there's nothing that would stop us from having a naming opportunity for these pickleball courts. If some of these groups that are organized want to contribute, those that Jeff knows.
That would be very
Uh,
It'd
appreciated.
be very nice.
Yes, that would
You know,
be.
we could always have some fundraising, in that manner.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, no, and I'd be happy to help drive that, even though it's, you know, now would be actually the time to get some involvement like that,
Right.
especially if it's naming. So happy to
great.
help there.
Councilman?
I'd like to make the motion that we proceed with the JBL contract.
Can I
Could you
add some
reword-
words to that?
reword that, please?
Motion to adopt the amended and restated capital project ordinance, award the bid for the recreation complex project to JLS Company LLC, and authorize the town manager to continue to negotiate with JLS and execute a contract that is acceptable to town staff and consistent with the adopted budget established in the amended and restated capital project.
I didn't have that many words, thank you.
That's what you meant. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Jeff, you had asked me some questions earlier today that maybe the chief could answer for you?
Yeah,
Better
well,
than I
just,
could?
and I know it wasn't on the agenda, but just a couple things that we've got in place now with the paving that occurred on the trails around the lake. And I think we talked about this way back when we were looking at the lake in general. It seems like right now we've got areas where you've got asphalt to asphalt. And are we going to delineate that border between the path and the street? Because right now, if I'm driving down that backside, somebody hadn't been there might before go, wow, it's wider, cool. And just drive up on there.
Yes.
If I can answer that, I actually talked to Dale about that this week. We are going to stripe it. In addition to, if you'll remember, back some time ago, you had a lot of discussion about, and it started with considering Lakeshore and Lake Louise Drive to be one-way streets. Remember that conversation? And so there are still, Dale's giving me signs over there. I don't know what that means. There's still work to be done to delineate between trail and road with bollards and that kind of thing.
Right.
I will say to you that I had the warm fuzzy feelings the other day for the first time going around the park. I saw two people in wheelchairs able to go around the entire park. And it made me very happy to be able to see that folks are able to use that now and not, not have to hesitate because of a disability. The other thing that Dale shared with me, and I think it's a very good point, and I've noticed it too now that he's pointed it out, is that paving that trail has gotten people out of the roads. Drive down there, drive around. You'll see that people are on the trails now, whereas before they were walking in the road. It's amazing. And it was a kind of one of those unintended plans.
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
people are not walking in the roads now.
They'll have that figured out.
Yeah.
Well, that would be good then. So, all right, well, thank you on that. And then the other, and this might be a bigger discussion for another time too, but, I think everybody's aware of the recent incident happened down in North Asheville in the park with the gentleman and the dog. And I was just wondering if we should find that incidents like that might drift north, our way. do we need to do anything special to anticipate or deal with them when they come up? Or are we already have contingencies in place?
I don't, what,
There was a
So-
homeless guy who stabbed a dog at the park.
Yeah, the pickleball.
Yes,
tennis
at the
in
tennis
North
court,
Ashland.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
Or
a really,
pickleball court, yeah.
really terrible situation. They now have learned
Mm.
that this gentleman had some mental health
Right.
background.
Mm.
Frankly, Chief Davis can respond to that, but we deal with mental health issues all the time in the police department. And I'm not sure how you plan for something as horrendous as
I
that.
don't know, you can't, that's why I ask.
My understanding is that, you're right, that was a spontaneous event, it's, something like that, it's really hard to predict.
Right.
I immediately looked at what can we do, is there some division to do some type of, I don't know if this person was camping, I don't know if he was not supposed to be there. I revisited and feel comfortable with the ordinances that we have in place. I would like to, and I've been looking at doing this to try to get some type of camera systems that are permanent on the opposite side of the lake and some on some trails. That endeavor is ongoing right now as we speak, and this has been a pilot to that, trying to see if we can get some measure of deterrence. I invite any suggestions that somebody may have. in addition.
Unfortunately, mental health is a complicated problem in our society, and one no one's come up with any good solutions for, I don't think. So. Any other items come up before this board this evening?
I just want to say I love the bicycles. We see them drive by
They're
our.
very, very popular on the 4th of
Yeah.
July, so that's good news. Anything else? All right, if that's the case, we're adjourned until next week.